Hi everybody, this is Riyad Kasim with QBrush.com. In this chapter, I'll be going through the base sculpt for the head of the character design. I start off by isolating the head using the solo function just to focus on the head sculpt. I select the clay brush and begin sculpting forms onto the mesh. I start off by layering strokes onto the mesh to break up forms. Adding in like a panel effect using the clay brush. I also add in cylinder strokes as markers to adding in separate cylinder details later. This sculpt will serve as a base for layering the panels and additional details. I use the move brush to tweak the overall form and the silhouette. Working in the transitions of the forms along the mesh. I return to the clay brush to block out more forms of the sculpt. During this stage, I'm trying to figure out the design of certain elements while I'm sculpting. I think of the design in layers of shapes and patterns that work together, and look for a rhythm and flow within the forms that I'm sculpting. I continue to sculpt with the clay brush, just layering in more strokes. Then using the move brush to tweak the silhouette of the character. I dynamesh to remesh the object. I sculpt with a clay brush while pressing Alt to subtract forms from the mesh. I work in the silhouette with the move brush, tweaking the proportions. Then return to the clay brush to lay in more strokes onto the mesh. I press the dynamesh button to remesh the object. I try to keep the dynamesh resolution low during the sketching stage, not worrying about minor details for now, just focusing on establishing a solid silhouette and basic forms that read well. I press the clay polish button to smooth out sketch details and create a polished effect on the surface of the mesh. I then select the damp standard brush to begin sketching out panel-like forms on the mesh. While sculpting, I'm trying to work out specific shapes of the panel forms. I return to the clay to block in more cylinder shapes. I dynamesh and then press the clay polish button again to polish out the mesh, looking for shapes that work. I then start sketching over the mesh with the clay and the damp standard brush. I start to develop the facial features while sketching with the damp standard brush. Here I'm basically looking for a good breakup of shapes and trying to maintain a visual rhythm and balance of the shapes. I just continue working out more of the forms with the clay brush and sketching out the features with the dam standard. Continuing to refine the panel-like effect using the clay and the dam standard. Return to the move brush to work in the silhouette again. Dynamesh to remesh surface. I work back into the silhouette with the move brush. I then select the clay brush for sculpting around the jaw area. I begin sketching out a panel effect with the dam standard brush around the jaw. Dynamesh to remesh object. Save project. Then I start sketching out more details on the head using the clay, dam standard and move brush, while using the Dynamesh functions. Refining the jaw with the clay brush. Adding more cylinder forms. Tweaking proportions with the move brush. Working out more of the neck forms with the clay and dam standard. Figuring out more of the shapes in the neck area and how the forms are working together. Refining more of the shapes for the cylinder pieces. Tweaking proportions with the move brush. Dynamesh to remesh object. Save project. And then return with the clay brush to work in more of the forms. Reviewing the sculpt, tweaking proportions with the move brush. Still refining those shapes with the clay. I start to sketch out basic designs with the dam standard, working in and refining the breakups of the shapes on the sculpt. Refining more of the facial features with the dam standard. Continuing to sketch out the panel-like design of the sculpt. Dynamesh and save. Working out some of the design details for the face, just sketching out with the damp standard, trying to create breakups in the jaw. Continuing to sketch out the panel shape designs of the mesh. Starting to develop the back of the head design. It helps to analyze the mesh from different angles for a more cohesive viewing of the design. Using a clay brush for cylinder details. Then use the move brush to move proportions of the face around. Just playing around with shape design. Dynamesh to remesh object. Reviewing sculpt. Working back into some of the shapes on the back of the head. Adding in more panel details with the damp standard brush. Focusing on the back of the head now. Just filling up panel-like details across the surface. Using the move brush to tweak the proportions. Working out some of the neck panel details. Starting to establish shape patterns within the design. Using similar shapes and patterns that flow and work together. Developing more of the jaw area details. Reviewing the sculpt. Saving file. I reveal the rest of the sculpt deactivating the solo function. Select the transpose move tool and move the head to fit better with the shoulder section. Then I begin to sculpt around the shoulder and neck area. I use the clay brush to block in some basic forms. I'm thinking of this part as an underlying suit structure to the design. I also start to consider different materials for each of the objects. Looking for shape design that works together with the neck. Start to think of the underlying structures and begin sketching out a layer effect with the damp standard brush. Smoothing out and working back into the details. Using the move brush to move the proportions around. Returning to the clay to block in some new forms. I sculpt in the base of the neck with the clay brush. Work back in with the damp standard to create some cylinder details. Basically experimenting and sketching out what details might work. Developing more of the back and shoulder design. The flashing from the mesh is caused by the dynamic solo button. Every time you move around the mesh, the dynamic solo function solos out the current mesh. This helps for less lag when there are multiple subtools to work with. Next, I select the IMM curve brush to insert some straps on the mesh. I press M to open up the brush menu and select the strap brush. I drag a stroke on the surface of the mesh and test out a few strokes. I use the curve move modifier to move the strap along the mesh. I press the group split button to separate the objects into separate subtools. Start to tweak the strap with the move brush. I select the IMM curve brush again and drag another shoulder strap on the previous one. Then select the move brush to move the second strap into place. I switch between the mesh selections by pressing Ctrl outside the mesh to invert selection. Tweak the placement of the one strap with the move brush. I then select the neck and shoulder area to do more sculpting. Refining more of the sketch using the damp standard brush on the shoulder and neck area. Select the head area and refine the head silhouette with the move brush. Switch back to the shoulder area to continue working out the shape and the forms.